Big shout out to today's video sponsor, Linsoul. Check out their fantastic deals in the links in the video description. Sustainable tech. Sounds like a great idea, right? We all want sustainability. It, by definition, keeps us going. So why aren't more people buying the Fairphone 4? A smartphone designed to last years, be easily repairable, and come in at half the cost of the current iPhones. Let's talk about that in my review of the Fairphone 4 18 months down the line. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas, and big thanks to Vodafone UK for sending out this smartphone for review. I'll leave links to their great deals and where you can buy the Fairphone in the video description. The Fairphone 4 looks pretty interesting on paper. I mean, you get a £450 phone with a replaceable battery, removable back, access to all the screws needed to disassemble the thing. You get a dual 48 megapixel cameras on the back, a 1080p 6.3 inch display, and Qualcomm Snapdragon 750G processor paired with either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. It seems pretty decent for the money, maybe a little dear, but you know, that's what you pay for sustainable tech. In the hand though, that's where things start to fall apart. And not the actual phone itself, it's built very well, but you'll see, the user experience is what falls apart. When you first pick up the Fairphone 4, you'll notice just how girthy and weighty the thing is. It feels like one of those tough phones built way back in 2014. And that isn't necessarily to say it's a bad thing. It's not sleek, it's not stylish, but it looks like it could take a beating, and that you probably don't need a case for it. I mean, what are you going to do? Scratch up the back and just go and buy a replacement? The capacitive side-mounted fingerprint reader was good in my opinion, and the buttons felt very tactile, solid, really nice buttons. The removable back plastic is more grippy than the glass we're used to on other smartphones, and whilst it doesn't have the highest IP rating at IP54, it does have a MIL810G spec as well. But, and this is a bit of a but, why is there no headphone port? I mean, sure, you know, I'm not the sort of person to go put a headphone port on the Samsung S Ultra or the iPhone. Like, I know that's never going to come back. I know that's not what the point of it is. But with a phone that's designed for sustainability, designed for people who kind of, you know, maybe want something a bit more functional, and it has a micro SD card slot, you know, it's got all these things, removable battery. Why no headphone port? I mean, this thing is built like a tank. It is huge. I just don't see the point of not having a headphone port on this. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but I feel like it's kind of an omission. The removable back makes way for the removable battery, like I said earlier, and the modular parts, including the port, speakers, the camera modules, everything you can see on the back here with the screws. Actually, some models of this come with the screwdriver along in the packaging to enable you to swap things out, which is really cool. As a computer repair technician, it annoys me to no end when someone comes in the shop with a high-end MacBook or a high-end Dell or any of like sort of the high-end modern machines, because they're designed to not be repaired at all. Like, everything's on one board, or it takes 25 screws to get to the DC socket, which is one of the areas that goes so frequently on laptops. And the same thing with smartphones, I imagine. For many people who repair these things, they want it to be as simple as possible to get to, and actually also as easy to get parts for as possible as well. So having the Fairphone 4 laid out in this way is a really, really great idea, and I think it's been executed quite well. Whilst we're here talking about batteries, I do want to talk about the battery life. It's a 3900-ish mAh battery, which isn't particularly big for a phone of this size, but when you consider that everything has to be packaged in such a way that it's modular, actually you probably couldn't fit any bigger of a battery in here. That said, it did get me over a full day of pretty heavy usage actually, leaving me with about 30% when I woke up the next morning, showing that standby time, whilst not excellent, isn't actually that bad. It tops up claimed 50% in 30 minutes with a 20-watt charger, and I do use an Apple 20-watt charger but didn't go super in depth with testing this charging speed, as this is one of those retrospective reviews and not a super in-depth technical analysis, which you can find online from the likes of Tech Advisor, Android Authority, all those websites. TLDR, the battery life and the charging, actually quite impressive. But that's about where things stop on the positive front, and you know, I want to give a preface going into this. I know why Fairphone had to cut corners, because of the way that you create sustainable technology, and actually sustainable pretty much anything. You need to be paying decent money for it. So you can't fully equate this to sort of a Pixel 7 or a Pixel 6a. You know, things in a similar price point, you have to look at it in a slightly different view. and I understand that, but I don't think many of the world do understand that. And so I'm going to have to look at things from the perspective of someone looking for a £455 phone, but at the same time kind of add the caveat that this is a sustainable one. First up, the screen. Look, it's not awful. Resolution is 1080p, which is good enough in my opinion. Well, more than good enough. And the refresh rate at 60Hz I think is absolutely fine as well, though 90 would have been nice. It's understandable why it's not 90. The main issue for me is the fact that the IPS LCDs, I don't care what you say, it's always a thing with these things, there's shadowing around the outside. You'll notice on the perimeter of the screen that there's like a shadow effect, as if the screen is like, set in place, and there's a distance between the screen and the glass, and it's quite substantial. And it just looks really cheap and tacky and horrible, and it was a thing 5 years ago and it's still a thing now. And it's the reason why actually I don't use phones with IPS LCDs anymore, because I just find that, once you see it, you can't unsee it no matter how hard you try, or at least that is the case for me. The colours are pretty decent, it gets pretty bright, and overall I would say it's a decent screen. It's just that shadowing effect that really annoys me, and it is so annoying that actually it's put me off actually buying one of these. It's just not good enough. The performance is decent, but it does feel slow at times, and it just doesn't have the grunt to get through some performances. Like switching between apps sometimes it will just hang for a bit, which is sort of okay I guess, but at this price point you're going to get smartphones that have decent performance, like better than this performance, and it's kind of like, okay, we let the screen slide, maybe we can let the performance slide as well. Although I must say I did play Genshin on it and actually it ran surprisingly well. Not really sure how that works, but there we go. But the worst offender here for me is the camera, or the cameras I should say, although it feels like it's only one. See, they look great on paper, and I would actually say that the hardware they're using isn't that bad. It's not actually the cheapest hardware you can find, it's decent camera hardware, but as with many cheap phones, the processing is really what gets this thing, and it's just not great. It criminally misses exposure, whether that's underexposing or overexposing. It either applies a washy noise reduction filter or cranks the absolute life out of sharpening, especially if you zoom in 2 times, which by the way is just a 2 times crop. Like, instead of just cropping the image, this thing just turns that sharpness filter all the way up until the dial comes off, and then it still pushes it even further. I mean, it looks absolutely shocking. I hate to be that guy that like dunks on a phone that is made for the betterment of the planet, but this is just not good enough. And the thing is my expectations going into it, I'm happy to make some sacrifices for a phone that is more sustainable. That's just me. I could, the screen annoys me, but it's a good screen other than that. Performance, maybe we can let that one slide, like it's going to be alright. But long-term software support, camera performance, these things that people care about, and unfortunately the majority of the world is going to look at that and go, I'm not spending 450 quid on that, and then they're going to go and buy something else. And that is a shame, but it's also kind of like understandable, because this feels like a phone that was made 5 years ago and not particularly good 5-year-old phone at that. It just doesn't feel great. I mean, physically it feels great, and the battery life is great, and it's good for someone who doesn't really care about smartphones. But for a lot of people, they have this in a shop or on their online store, and they're shopping for that alongside a Pixel 6a or a Nothing Phone 1 or anything like that. What are they going to buy? Of course they're going to buy the Nothing Phone. Of course they're going to buy the Pixel. They just look so much better, and they have modern features, and they just feel more sleek. But I am so glad that the Fairphone 4 exists, and I really hope that the Fairphone 5 irons out the issues with the camera. That's a software thing. You employ a couple of people to do, it's probably more technical and difficult than this, but you employ a couple of people, sort that software out, camera's sorted. The camera hardware is good enough. The screen, I'm probably a bit picky about that. I'm sure many people can, look past the fact there is shadowing on the IPS, and that's not a particular fault of Fairphones, that's just how the technology works. And performance and long-term software support, maybe you can just, apply more software support, or do you know what I mean? These are things that it's got a good foundation, the Fairphone 4. It doesn't need to be completely overhauled. It just needs a little bit of software tweaking to make it you know, maybe not the most amazing £450 phone, but one that more people might gravitate towards. If you scream from the rooftop, you can repair this thing, it's much cheaper to keep long term. If they put like a sustainable sort of graphic that they can show, look how much you'd spend on a phone, or multiple phones, over 3 years with this versus this, where you can show that maybe a couple of little modules needs to be swapped out or whatever, and you're saving yourself, you know, 120, 130 quid per year or whatever. You know, it needs to be, the world isn't full of people who want it to be sustainable. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. I think it needs to be readdressed and reshuffled a bit. That's my rant. Is it a good phone? Yeah. But, you know, if you're on the fence between buying one of these and a Pixel 4 and you're not particularly worried about sustainability, just buy the Pixel 4. Yeah, and I said Pixel 4. That's what I've been sort of comparing this to whilst reviewing it, because it's that much cheaper and it was kind of seen as the worst Pixel, or the worst Pixel, and actually it comes out on top against this in multiple areas. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you have one of these phones, if you enjoy it or not. It was a good experience for me to check it out, but it just did not feel as polished as I think it should. Thank you to Vodafone UK for sending this thing out. Links to them will be in the video description. This isn't a sponsored video. They're not paying me to say nice things about their product or their phone, but they've lent me the phone. I've chucked them a couple of links in the description. Good deal in my opinion. Alright guys, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Links will be in the description to my socials. A massive shout out to my patrons for being continually supportive, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.